My last lecture, I ended um, talking about the significance and influence of the French-Algerian War. Um, and so it really did have a major impact on French society. In 1958, it was a crisis in France. De Gaulle, the famous military vet, World War II military leader, ran for office and addressed the issue of Algeria and the French Empire. He negotiated peace in 1959. In 1960 and 61, the French army revolted. He retained order, escaped an assassination attempt, and set Algeria free in 1962. So I just covered this in a very fast way, but needless to say, that French society really had a bit of an existential crisis over this war. But you'll notice almost all of North Africa was dominated by France, and also something that we're going to kind of address in my next lecture for next week, or last lecture, is that North Africa is really dominated by Arab culture. So we think about white colonizers in South Africa. What is North Africa, a part of the Middle East, or is it a part of Africa? And there is a little bit of a difference. So Sub-Saharan Africa is mainly what we're thinking of when we talk about Africa. And so there is a kind of, for the northern parts of Africa, there is this kind of cultural divide somewhat, even though Islam is all throughout, and Arab culture throughout other parts of Africa. So anyhow, independence movements in the north inspired the south. From 1957 to 1965, colonies regained their freedom. And after independence, problems with severe drought, causing millions to be displaced and malnourished. So actually, what I'm trying to say is that in this decolonization that really happens after World War II, there's this excitement about kicking out the colonizers and creating independence. And there were a lot of problems that still exist with the post-colonial condition of Africa. But you had a lot of optimism. You had people like in Ghana, nationalist Kwame Nkrumah. He was a Pan-Africanist, and he basically kind of had this vision of a united Africa. He also got viewed as I think he made himself president for life or something like that. But in any case, you had all these kind of new characters emerge with these different visions of Africa than we've seen, also heavily influenced by the education that was brought in through the colonizers and so forth. Briefly, just go to Kenya. And again, I'm just doing a brief overview here. The last independence movement to succeed in British East Africa, so we talked about the French, there was a famous Mau Mau rebellion, and they were basically a Kenyan indigenous group that rebelled against the British. The British cracked down very hard and killed many of the rebels. And eventually, though, Kenya was led to independence in 1961. I want you to think about, though, how recent really this all is in a certain retrospect. Your professor, was born in 1973. And so 12 years before, right, I'm born. Is that right? My brain's not working really well. In any case, a little more than a decade before I was born, Kenya is just becoming independent. So we're talking about a really recent states. We talk about post-colonial Africa. We're not talking about something going way back, right? Actually, I'm going to move on to another one. So we talked a lot about Belgium before in the Congo. We talked about Lumumba. Whenever he was overthrown, the Congo fell apart after that. There was a problem of tribalism there versus nationalism. The CIA and other interest groups, as we pointed out, were involved in this. And so the country became Zaire, now Democratic, then became Democratic Republic of Congo. Interesting name, right? Again, many of these right-wing dictators that were anti-communist were on very good terms with the U.S. Now, just talking about South Africa and apartheid. South Africa is its own topic, and I'm going to actually end here and we'll go to the next lecture.